I honestly don't know where to begin or how I start out this video, but I wanted to come on here tonight and just really talk and have a conversation with you guys and to whoever who may be listening or watching. So, um, so at work, when I'm on the multivac at work, which basically is a robot, it's hard to explain. Um, Usually there's three people on the machine. There's one up front filling the robots with the trays, and there's two out back inspecting the print and inspecting the swabs. I like that opportunity for me to be up there by myself. We rotate every 30 minutes, so I have 30 minutes to talk to myself and think out loud and have all these thoughts randomly coming up and just really talking. And today's talk was really interesting for me, and also the conversation I had with my dad earlier tonight really kind of wanted me to do this video. So what I talk about at work is I'm thinking to myself, I'm talking to God, and the biggest thing that God has really shown me and has told me is to not lean on my own understanding, but to lean on His. And I get it. I understand that. I understand that we got to lean on His understanding and His wisdom, His guidance, His way of living versus us. Because when I say that we need to not lean on our own understanding, but we should be leaning on God's understanding, it's like a parent telling a teenager wisdom, but the teenager wants to listen to their side of the story. They want to listen to what they want to listen in here versus what they don't want to hear. We don't want to, teenagers don't want to hear adults' advice and their wisdom. They want to do their own thing. And that's like with us as Christians. Um, we can't lean on God. We can't lean on our own. We can't and we should not lean on our own understanding, but we should rely on God's understanding because He's all know and powerful. So, um, the other thing that God has brought up into my life is that we need to seek Him first in everything. Seek Him first in everything. Um, I didn't quite understand this verse. I know it's been brought up a lot of times when I've been at church. Is to seek Him first, seek His kingdom first, and all these things will be given to you. So at work, I reminisce and I think about back when I was homeless and when I was really struggling back then, and I look at that whole situation, being homeless and living in a hotel and then living with my ex's sister's place and eventually getting a place of her own, whatever. Um, I was struggling. I was struggling financially. I was struggling trying to maintain a job, struggling trying to be positive, and I just, I don't know. But when I was in that whole situation of being homeless and not having a place of my own and not having any money and not, God saw me through it. And what I mean by that is, even though God isn't doing what I'm expecting for Him to do, like grant me my wishes, that's not how it works. God did provide. Okay, um, even though in our situation at the time where we were being kicked out and we had to move in behind my ex's friend's house in a tent, um, God provided a place for us to live temporarily in a tent during the summertime. And when it got colder, when school started out, it was too cold to stay in the tents. And so then my ex's caseworker at the time found us a place to stay at a hotel for a couple of weeks, couple months, whatever. Um, it was a couple months, maybe something like that, and it got to the point where, because at the time my ex was trying to work towards getting her son back from the state, and we found out, or she found out, that in order for her to get her son back, we need to have a stable living space, and being at a hotel wasn't a living space to get her son back. So it ended up where she decided that we would all stay at her sister's place in Belfast, and that would be the only way to get her son back. And I'm going to tell you, living with her sister at the time was a living hell. It was a living hell. I hated it. I did not like living there. I barely couldn't get any sleep because at that time I was working for Maine Behavioral Health Care as a crisis stabilization worker, and I worked overnights, and it was hard for me to come home or go to the apartment and actually be able to sleep, and there was nowhere to sleep. I even tried sleeping in the kids' room, but her sister decided to walk in and make noise and disturb me, and I barely got any sleep. And at that time, I was also working for Sequel Care Maine, which I think they changed their name. And I say that because I look at my memories and I'm like, oh, they changed the name from Sequel Care to this. No. No, I was working at Sequel Care, and I was working Maine Behavioral. I was working nights at Maine Behavioral, and I was working as a DSP for Sequel Care Maine and also a BHP. So I was working a lot of hours, and it was just hell. It was just a living hell. Didn't get any sleep, trying to maintain, I don't know how you want to say it. But the biggest thing and as I was thinking about that at work, it was either today or the other day or whatever, I realized that at that time when working at Maine Behavioral Health Care and working for Sequel Care Maine, I felt myself trying to establish a title for myself. Like, this is who I am. I am a crisis stabilization worker, CSW, at a crisis stabilization home. And then I'm also a DSP and a BHP. And I was in the mental health for quite a few years, or a couple years actually. But I just honestly, looking back at it now, I realized that I was trying to work towards something that was not reachable at all. Not reachable. When you're trying to make a name for yourself and you forget about God, and you're trying to do everything yourself at the same time, it doesn't work out. You say you believe in God, but then you're trying to do all these things on your own, trying to establish a title and a name and being able to and an image. That's the biggest thing right there, is the image. I was not only trying to establish a title, but I was also trying to establish an image. I was. Here's the reason why I had two jobs. Okay. So when we moved in with her sister had a boyfriend and her sister has kids, right? And we went to Dutch Chevrolet, which now is Stanley Chevrolet in Belfast. Anyways, and I had a Chevy Malibu Max, I think it was at the time. And we just, I was talking to my ex at the time, and we decided that we would get a bigger vehicle, seeing how we're all living together. And the car that I had then wasn't going to be big enough to, transport everybody else. So we got I don't remember what year it was, but it was a very fancy car. It was a Chevy Traverse. It had all the bells and whistles. I really liked the car, but the car payments really sucked. Plus the insurance, plus trying to find tires for it was whatever. The payment for the car was a little over $600 a month. I don't know what the insurance was because I don't remember, but I do remember the cost of the car per month. It was over $600 a month. And getting it registered and was also pretty expensive too. Um, my ex's sister and I, we had an agreement that I'd pay half for the car and that she would pay half of the car. Well, that didn't work out. She never paid anything. So when we got our taxes back, we moved, my ex and our daughter and her son, we all moved out, and we moved into a really crappy apartment. It was a 2-bedroom apartment. It was affordable for us to rent, but the landlord was a total jerk. I will say that. And he was a total jerk. He wasn't much of a landlord. It's a long story. There's so many things. There's so many rabbit holes I could go down and tell you about how awful it was. And being with the landlord. So we got this apartment, and I still had the Chevy Traverse. And the biggest thing that I found out too, like, I felt like everything was on me. Everything was on me to try to afford this car. It got to the point where the car needed tires, which I could not afford at the time. Tires were expensive. Because I was traveling so much from Belfast to Rockland, from Rockland to Belfast, from Belfast to Searsport, from Searsport to Belfast to Swanville. It's whatever. So what really bothered me the most was the fact that, I'm driving this really expensive car. I'm trying to figure out how to afford it. And I didn't know how to afford it. I didn't know how to come up with the money to pay for it. So it got repossessed. And the biggest thing that I really hated the most was the fact that I'm trying to maintain transportation to get from point A to point B. My ex at the time, she was more concerned about having a place over our heads. She was more concerned about having money for rent, money for her tobacco and her paper rolls, cigarettes. She was in control of the money all the time. I what's really sad is this. Okay, we go shopping, right? And we're out Hannaford shopping. It's pretty sad when I say, "Hey, can we get this?" And she goes, and basically she said, "Yeah, if we have enough money in the budget to get it." And I'm like, "Okay, whatever, I won't get it." And then it got to the point where we were so struggling that we couldn't afford coffee, we couldn't afford soda, we couldn't afford a lot of things. And we were just scraping pennies and coins and dollars because we got to a point, I know I'm going off topic here, but we got to a point where we were thirsty. We wanted something to drink. We needed soda or caffeine or whatever. And we scraped as much money as we could. We drove all the way to Circle K to get a Pepsi or Mountain Dew or whatever. And that lasted for not even an hour. But anyways, so we lost the Traverse. The Traverse got repossessed. And my ex and myself, we are without transportation. At that time, I was working for On Process Technology in Belfast, which I don't think they're there anymore, because when I looked them up online to do an application about my previous work experiences, I put down On Process, but I found out that they were permanently closed. I thought they laid off people. I thought what happened? How come this isn't in the news? Well, I found out that when COVID hit, they couldn't really, I don't know if this is true or not, but they couldn't really have people work in a office setting so close to each other doing, phone calls, as it was a call center. But I will tell you something, that place was a joke. But I was almost there for about a year. So, yeah. Anyways, so we're without a car. I'm having to go walk to work from John Street, High Street, and I had to go on Waldo Avenue. I walked down Waldo Avenue, walked up, walked up on Main Street, heading towards the fire department and going towards Bank of America. And I don't know how many times I had to walk to work and then walk home, depending if I was able to get a ride or not. So there were some nights where they were really cold, where I was actually walking home in the cold, and it took me about an hour and a half or so to get back home, and it was dumb. And what really ticked me off one night was that my ex made supper, and she made enough for everybody, including myself. I got home. There is there is dishes soaking in the sink, dishes that are clean. The ex is in the living room watching TV, and I look to see if there was any food for me for supper, and she goes, "Oh, her son was still hungry, so she gave my portion of the supper to him. So I didn't have anything to eat." She thought more about her son than she did me, and she thought more about her son than her daughter. She wanted me to spend more time with him. And what really ticks me off is I spent more time with her son than I did with our daughter. And she, like, I don't get it. We went, like, there were times where I had to go on a field trip with him because the ex didn't want to go. She would send me to go on these field trips. But anyways, I'm going on a tangent. I'm going down a rabbit hole. I'm sorry. It's almost 7 o'clock. I should be in bed by now, but I have a coffee. But anyways, but back to what I was saying. Okay, so God saw me through it, right? I think about those times when I was homeless. And what I'm trying to get at is that even though God didn't provide us what we hoped or what we thought or what we imagined, God still provided shelter for us, even though it wasn't what we expected, even though it's not what we wanted. He still provided. He provided tents. He provided a job for me to have money for these tents, for the 2 tents that we had. He provided me, of course, with a job, but he provided me a way to afford a storage unit for all of our stuff. God blessed me with a better paying job, which I wouldn't last there very long. I knew I wasn't going to last long there because I was doing overnights. Yeah. But God provided. God provided. And he listens. He does listen. And God reminds me about that a lot. So God is always listening. He's always watching. And God always sees us through the struggles. And God always sees us through the storms of life. We got to be patient enough to say, okay, God's in control. God has this. God knows what he's doing. We just got to sit back and just trust in the process. So at that time, here I am at work. I'm on the robots. I'm talking to myself, and I'm talking about being with a guy that I met back in 2011. I've only seen him a couple of times at Walmart. We've said hi, going by. This guy I met in 2011, I fell right in love with him. And I wanted to be with him. I wanted to, have a relationship with him, but that never happened. Never happened. What God showed me, it was either today or the following day or the day before, but what God showed me was He's showing me that I idolize this guy who I wanted to be with. This guy's got his fingernails painted, so I'm like, oh, I'll paint my nails too. Had a buzz cut. dyed my hair, trying to get his attention. I bought him stuff. I bought him a pair of, I think it was Ninja Turtle pajama bottoms. hmm And I bought him a couple of other things, but that one right there is what I remember. But we grew close as friends. We really did. And it wasn't until 2015 or 16 he decided to leave Belfast to go back to Madison to be with his son and to see more of his son, whatever. Um, if I could talk to him and meet up with him over a cup of coffee or something, I'd be like, you know what? I'm sorry for how I was around you and how I treated you and how I had all these thoughts about wanting to have a relationship with you. I enjoyed our friendship. But I think for me that I thought about this today, what I thought about was I need closure and I need to move on. How do I set the closure in order for me to move on? Because I've spent the last 8 years here in Heartland, and this was just right after I broke up with the ex, and I waited 8 years to expect a phone call or text message from him. Neither of those happened. I even saw him at Walmart when I worked for Skills. I was in Skowhegan Walmart, and I saw him at the paint department. And I told him that, yeah, I'm living in Heartland. Maybe we should meet up or hang out. Hey, what's your phone number? Got his phone number, but eventually I lost it, so I don't have it. But I have him on Facebook, though. So, but I need closure. And here's the thing. Here's the kicker. I just had the thought. I have years ago, back when I was not with the ex, I was living with my parents at the time, well, mostly my dad, and I knew that I wanted to live a gay lifestyle. I knew that this is what I wanted, this is how I wanted to live, this is who I am, this was a part of me. But back then, I didn't feel safe. I felt ashamed of myself and I needed somewhere to go, so I went to the park unit. That is when I got diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, anxiety, general anxiety. And years later, in 2020, I got diagnosed with bipolar type 2 disorder with chronic PTSD. Not that it matters, but what I'm trying to get at is I feel like obsessing over this friend of mine that I had a crush on that I wanted to be with. I'm just realizing how much time left I got on this video. So, make a long story short, make a short story long, whatever. I feel like personally, it was a personality thing that I was dealing with. I think being gay is a personality disorder, part of the personality disorder. But I also thought of this too while I was at work. I allowed myself to be exposed for all those years of going on gay websites, going on gay chat rooms, looking up pictures, photos. And I submitted myself to seeing all these things on the internet. So, yeah. But I'm going to end it here. I got like 24 minutes. I only got 25 minutes in. So I just will end it here. And tomorrow will be another story. So thanks for watching.